So it's true. The great Nolan fathered a child with an Earth woman.
What do you want?
You. If you fight well, we may allow you to join the Empire. If not, you'll die.
In an alternate universe, Mark Grayson, aka Invincible, fights against the Immortal, with help from his father, Nolan Grayson, aka Omni-Man, in an effort to conquer Earth for their home planet, Viltrum. In the destroyed city below, a man named Angstrom enters a secret underground resistance facility, where he and other rebels plot to overthrow their oppressors. Unfortunately, Omni-Man and Invincible easily break in and begin to slaughter them all. However, Angstrom manages to escape through a mysterious green portal, narrowly avoiding the mayhem. Back in the main universe, a month has passed since Omni-Man's betrayal, and the Earth still reels from his destructive exit. Mark continues to fight crime as his indestructible superhero alter ego, Invincible, despite feeling abandoned and numb. At school, he receives support from his friends, but confiding with fellow hero Atomic Eve, Mark admits that his biggest fear is that he will end up like his father and become a heartless tyrant. In the Global Defense Agency's underground prison, the brutish Mahler brothers are mysteriously granted a free exit when mysterious portals pop up in their cells. Stepping through, they meet Angstrom, a man who possesses the ability to open portals to any dimension in the vast multiverse. Promising their freedom in exchange for some mechanical help, Angstrom explains that, in most universes, Omni-Man and Invincible have teamed up and conquered the galaxy. However, Angstrom believes that he can reach universal peace by combining the knowledge of all universes. To achieve this, he has collected hundreds of alternate versions of himself, and using a massive mind-transferring machine the Mahlers have built, he plans to siphon all of their intellect into his own brain. Returning home, Debbie Grayson gets a surprise visit from Olga, the wife of the deceased superhero, Red Rush. While comforting Debbie over Omni-Man's betrayal of her family and the planet at large, Olga suggests that she seek help from a specialized support group. Meanwhile, the new Guardians of the Globe struggle to contain common villains without excessive collateral damage. When they return to their headquarters, they are reprimanded by Cecil, who institutes a new leader, the revived hero, Immortal, as well as a new hero named Bulletproof to beef up the team. After tracking the Mahlers and Angstrom to a warehouse in the city, Cecil decides to send Invincible to investigate. Arriving just as Angstrom straps himself into the machine and the knowledge transfer begins, Invincible struggles to fight a wave of Mahlers, summoned from other dimensions, who ultimately overpower him. However, upset at the violence, Angstrom removes his helmet too early, causing a massive explosion, incinerating almost everyone in the immediate area. Living up to his name, Invincible survives the blast, but despite a technically successful mission, he struggles with the high loss of life. Things get a bit more cheerful later that night, when both Mark and Amber receive their acceptance letters from Upstate University and are overjoyed at the prospect of continuing their relationship through college. However, while walking back from Amber's, Mark is confronted by Immortal, who questions his loyalty. Back at the site of the explosion, despite all odds, two survivors emerge from the rubble, one of the Mahler brothers and Angstrom. However, they are both disfigured from the explosion. Angstrom, struggling to balance with an engorged brain packed full of interdimensional memories, vows to take revenge on Invincible. High school graduation begins. Mark finds himself running late as he battles the villainous Doc Seismic at the Washington Monument. Luckily, he wraps things up just in time to collect his diploma and celebrate with his friends. At the United States Space Agency, the Mars expedition team discuss their findings, including the extremely dangerous parasitic species called the sequids, and demand that action be taken immediately. Russ Livingston, an astronaut who is actually a shape-shifting Martian, is put on temporary leave due to his odd behavior, and while watching television at home, sees a newscast about the late hero Martian Man and finds inspiration. While other teens enjoy their summer break by relaxing, Eve uses her powers to rebuild around Chicago. As an extra kind gesture, she builds a luxurious playground in an impoverished neighborhood, going against city restrictions. Also passing over a standard summer vacation, Mark continues to help Cecil and the GDA, and undertakes a mission to the cursed metropolis of Midnight City. There he finds Nightboy, the sidekick of the deceased superhero Darkwing, now a deranged and violent vigilante. After a quick tussle through a dark dimension called the Shadowverse, Invincible manages to subdue Nightboy, marking another successful mission. At the same time, Debbie arrives at the GDA and meets with Cecil, demanding that he give Mark more time to rest. Before being ushered out of the building, she is shocked to see Donald, Cecil's assistant, who supposedly died months prior. When Eve goes to visit her parents, she learns that they are in financial trouble, and despite being able to easily fix everything with her powers, her father refuses the help. Pointing out her lack of judgment, he shows her that the playground she built had already collapsed, as the land was structurally unsafe. Trying to spice up his relationship, Mark flies Amber to Las Vegas for an impromptu lunch date, but he is called away by Cecil for another mission. Geared up in his suit, Cecil tells Invincible that he must travel to Atlantis to atone for the murder of their king, who was killed by Omni-Man. Arriving under the false pretense of a customary marriage, Invincible is forced to fight a massive sea beast called the Depth Dweller, and when it gets loose, he chooses to stay and defeat it in order to protect the innocent Atlanteans. Returning home and finding his mother distraught in the kitchen, Mark and Debbie hold each other after a long and emotional day. Elsewhere, the Guardians of the Globe are introduced to Russ, who now goes as the superhero Shapesmith, after unintentionally working with the evil Lizard League. Having been defeated by the Guardians, the Lizard League undergoes a power shift when their old leader returns and reclaims his position. In another universe, the ultra-minded Angstrom traps Invincible and interrogates him about his weaknesses before turning him over to the authorities. On the first day of college, Mark prepares for a new chapter in his life, rooming with his best friend William and enjoying some private time with Amber. Now more alone than ever before, Debbie decides to follow Olga's advice and contacts the special support group. Shifting focus elsewhere in the galaxy, the origin of Alan the Alien is revealed, who comes from the once peaceful planet Europa. Although Europa was viciously conquered by Viltrumites years ago, some survivors escaped and eventually made contact with Tatus, the leader of the coalition of planets. Joining forces, they eventually bred an ultra-strong Unopan, named Alan. And although incredibly powerful, Alan was still not strong enough to defeat a Viltrumite. Instead, he was sent to find and recruit an ally strong enough to reclaim Unopa, eventually leading to his meeting with Mark Grayson. Now holding more hope than ever before, Alan returns to the coalition and tells them about Mark. And despite the protest from some council members, Tatus agrees that they could exploit this discovery. In private, Tatus informs Alan that there might be a potential mole in the coalition and encourages him to uncover the truth. Later, while having lunch with his lover Telia, Alan is brutally maimed by a group of Viltrumites when he refuses to give them information about his encounter with Omni-Man or Invincible. Although he survives, Alan is betrayed further by Tatus, who unplugs his life support and leaves him for dead. Back on Earth, at the Guardians HQ, Shapesmith continues to try and fit in, despite his awkward behavior. Elsewhere, Debbie finally arrives at the support group, specially made for spouses of superheroes. While chatting with a fellow group member at the bar afterward, she is surprised to learn that she is the husband of the Green Ghost, one of the heroes that Omni-Man murdered. Overcome with guilt, she reveals that she is Omni-Man's wife, and is further shunned. At university, Mark receives a surprise visit from a shape-shifting creature named Nuelzot, who comes from the distant planet of Thraxa. Nuelzot claims that Mark is the only hero powerful enough to save his planet, and against the orders of Cecil, Mark decides to help. Gearing up as Invincible and bidding farewell for a few weeks, Mark travels to Thraxa, and upon arrival, is overwhelmed to discover that his father, Omni-Man, is their leader. Flashing back to the day he fought Invincible and fled Earth, Omni-Man drifts aimlessly through space for months. Unable to cope with betraying his family and his duty as a Viltrumite, he considers throwing himself into a black hole, but stops short when he sees a Thraxan ship in distress. Instead of surrendering to the unknown, Omni-Man saves the Thraxans and safely returns them to their home planet, where he is welcomed as their savior. In the present, Mark meets with his father, and putting aside their resentment momentarily, they embrace. However, things get even more complicated when Omni-Man introduces Mark to his new Thraxan wife, Andressa, and their infant son. With months past, Omni-Man is convinced that the other Viltrumites will track him down for betraying his duty, and when they find Thraxa, a massacre will ensue. Ultimately, Mark is left with no time to decide, as the same Viltrumites who beat up Alan suddenly make landfall and begin their attack. Fleeing with Andressa and his half-brother, Mark finds a relatively safe spot to hide out, but they are soon discovered by the Viltrumite soldier, Lucan. Luckily, Omni-Man swoops in to end the fight before Mark is overpowered. Back on Earth, Mahler goes back to his old ways and produces another clone. Meanwhile, Donald takes a trip to the Grayson house, and while searching the destroyed lot across the street, he finds a pair of his own glasses buried under the debris. That night, while Eve is sleeping at the old Teen Team HQ, she finds the villain Killcannon trying to steal some technology. As their fight breaks out onto the bridge below, Eve manages to defeat Killcannon, but is distressed when two civilians are injured in the process. At the GDA, Donald does some digging, and while reviewing surveillance footage, is horrified to see his own death on film. On Thraxa, Omni-Man and Mark continue to fight the two Viltrumite warriors, Vidor and Thula. As the battle gets bloodier, Omni-Man encourages Mark to resort to deadly measures, but he refuses. Although significantly injured in the tussle, Mark manages to survive, thanks to some much-needed help from his father, defeating Vidor and Thula. Unfortunately, Lucan returns, still alive, and deals a crushing blow to Omni-Man, leaving him crippled on the ground. As the rest of the Viltrumites haul Omni-Man away to their ship, Mark is greeted by Viltrumite General Craig, who tells him that he must continue his father's original mission and conquer Earth himself. Back at the Mahler's warehouse, the recently created clone grows tired of being bullied, so he poisons the other Mahler's drink, killing him instantly.
So I'll put it like this. You can kill a few humans to convince them to capitulate, or we will kill millions if we arrive to find you or your planet still defiant against us. We will check on your progress soon. And unlike your father, we do not change our minds.